Finishing off 2024, and Hardy takes rank 7 on the leaderboard, mostly playing hazards. Chaddy shouldn't need an introduction at this point, but he's one of the best tank players in Europe. So let's see how he makes hazard work up against the infamous W-Ange alongside pro players Cookie and Ilpy. The first, admittedly unusual part of his play is his weird wall climb usage. Hazard basically has two animations during his wall climb. Him actually scaling the wall, of which he can only do for a second or two, and him actually climbing over the wall itself. It's this second animation that you can do infinitely, meaning you can abuse this on certain surfaces to set yourself up for a big rollout. You can see him doing this here on Hollywood first, also do this on Hollywood second, as you can see Belosria doing here. Hardy also does a similar thing on Shambali defense, showing why this tech is useful in the first place. It gives you a great unexpected angle to engage from, and he almost ends up killing the Sojourn because of it. Of course, he does that standard one-shot combo, which most of you should already know, where you leap, shoot, slash, shoot again, and follow up with a melee. This can do up to 270 damage, assuming all your shots land as body shots. However, the most important thing with this is understanding when to go for the one-shot and when not to. In the Sojourn example, Hardy is about 15 meters give or take away from the Sojourn, and she hasn't got power slide. Because you move 15 meters with your leap, an extra 5 meters if you b-hop, and another extra 5 meters including your slash range, your maximum reach is about 20 to 25 meters. One way of visualizing this is to imagine that Hazard has got a circle around him with a radius of about 15 to 20 meters. If any squishy enters that circle, they are prone to being one-shot. Now, that's a bit oversimplified of course, because characters like Sojourn can more easily escape that circle than someone like Zen, but it can be a useful starting point for most players. Now, if you're someone like Sojourn, you're gonna purposely try and tease the enemy Hazard to dive onto you, and then you just dip with power slide. So, what do you do if you're the Hazard here? Well, in short, you play slow and you play for advantages. In that very same example with Hardy, he gets a numbers advantage because his Tracer gets a pulse kill. He then pushes the Sojourn, and even though he misses the slash, the Sojourn is forced to leave with power slide. This now gives him a cooldown advantage. He continues by blocking and walling off the Sojourn, getting her low, now giving him a HP advantage. Everything stacking in his favour, he can now reach deep and catch the Sojourn. Now, let's look at a more difficult case. Hardy is miles away from the enemy backline. He would feed his brains out if he tried to dive for a one-shot. Not to mention, the Lucio Kiriko are also very slippery. Lucio because he can boop you away, and Kiriko because of her TP. Even when Hardy goes to the high ground and they're technically within his reach, he doesn't go for them. Instead, he zones and distracts the Lucio Kiriko, allowing his Widow to get a kill and forcing the Kiriko to drop. Afterwards, Hardy turns to the enemy Hazard, leaping onto him and finishing the kill. This would be a great segue into the three main playstyles of Hazard that we've just seen. The first is diving. In other words, going for that classical one-shot play and maybe even chucking in your wall too. The second is to zone. This is where you don't actually make a positional commitment, but you just threaten an area, usually for some time, either with your gun, block, or wall. The third and last playstyle is the brawl. This will just be trading blows onto the enemy tank, most commonly done in the pre-fight, or just going at the enemy tank if he's straight up feeding. Do note that you can change between these playstyles on the fly, with Hardy zoning the enemy Lucio before switching playstyles to brawl the enemy Hazards. Here's another classic case. W-Ange is playing pretty close to Hardy, so he decides to land a pretty good wall, isolating off the Hanzo and blocking the Lucio's retreat. This gives him a trigger or advantage to dive the Lucio, and while he doesn't land the one-shot, his gun gets the job done. He then very briefly zones the Hanzo Ash, but before getting nano boosted. Realizing he can't actually reach the Hanzo Sojourn, mainly because the Hanzo is playing too far, and the upper floor of the building would probably fuck up his leap, he decides to turn and brawl the enemy Hazard, eventually finishing the kill. Also notice that just by Hardy's sheer aura, he zones the enemy Sojourn. This is key because if he just went onto the Hazard immediately, the Sojourn wouldn't have to power slide away from Hardy. That wall onto Ange also gives a good transition to talk about your wall too. Now, we'd be here all day if I listed all the uses of your wall. The main one is using it to aggress press onto a target to enable your one-shot in some kind of way, either by booping the enemy into you, isolating them from their team, using the extra damage as a finisher, or all three. The secondary use is more defensive, basically using it like a Winston bubble to absorb cooldowns, hold space, and zone enemies. Hopefully you're seeing how this ties into your playstyles. We see some of those former users of wall here, where he walls the Hanzo to block his retreat, and to also finish him off with that damage. Against the enemy hazard, he walls him into the wall, helping him contribute to that brawl playstyle. Funnily enough, afterwards, we get to see a massive clutch by Hardy, who dives the Kiriko, finishing the kill with his wall, and while he might seem cooked because of his low HP, this is Hardy we're talking about. Just as the Widow is retreating, Hardy predicts her pathing, attempting the one-shot by doing the B-hop tech, and blocking to finish her off. Now on 15 HP, while Ange's busy reloading, Hardy leaps above him, getting the most clutch and satisfying one-shot I've seen in a minute. Because Hazard shares a lot of the same characteristics as other Brawl Dive tanks, especially Junker Queen, it can be very tempting to position like them. However, because of your verticality, you probably should be thinking more like a Winston or a Doomfist. In other words, finding positions where it's very hard for the enemy team to force you out, so you're playing safely, but also a position that allows you to punish the enemy team very easily, so you're playing aggressively. Look at where Hardy sets up here. He's playing an angle such that if the enemy team rotate underneath him, he can easily punish them. But he's also playing an angle where it's very hard and expensive for the enemy team to force him out from that position. As a result, the enemy Hazard and Sojourn completely give up trying to force out Hardy, realizing they just wasted their time. And now, knowing that his Sojourn's playing very aggressively with the overclock, Hardy drops the follow-up. Thankfully, the Genji overextends, allowing Hardy to go for the one-shot too. On a different point, Hardy actually uses that wall climb tech in combination with this idea. Because of the literal wall, Hardy is very safe against the Genji Sojourn, but he's also within range to aggressively punish either the Genji Sojourn or the Brig Ana. Hardy ends up choosing the Brig Ana, probably because they've got less mobility, doing one of those defensive walls to zone the Brig. While he does get slept and naded, because his Ana has constant LOS to him, she lands a clutch nade, eventually allowing Hardy to kill both the Ana and Brig. Now, I hate having to talk about this because it's so simple, but please do not waste your block. The sheer amount of Hazard players I've seen who've used block simply because they're too lazy to use their gun is astonishing. Your gun deals 150 DPS, whereas your block deals 70. You're just kneecapping yourself for no actual gain. Your block should primarily be a defensive sustainability like we just saw against the Brig Ana, and even in my last video, we did see it briefly when Hardy was playing in Kitsune Rush. You can also use it to block specific bursts of damage. For instance, you can see Hardy quickly pop his block in response to the enemy Hazard slashing onto him. I will say it's completely fine to use block both for defense, but to also simultaneously deal damage. They're not mutually exclusive. However, if you're full HP fighting a single target and they're not very low, just please use your gun. A very common issue I see with Hazard players is also their spike usage. Now, spikes can be difficult to land against highly mobile comps, but even against less mobile ones, spikes can still be tough to use because characters like Zen and Hanzo can play miles away from you. You really only have three main uses then. Firstly, use it in the mid-fight when the enemy team use the mobility cooldowns, allowing you to punish them. Alternatively, you can use spikes to punish or catch the enemy team if they're trying to make an aggressive play, like diving your backline. And lastly, you can just solo ult someone, just like Ryan Shatter. Obviously, with Hardy having a history as a Ryan player, you can see him do that last use here, where he catches the Ana, guaranteeing a kill. In a different fight, he does that second use, punishing the aggression from the opposing Ana Hazards. Anyways, I think that's a good wrap for the video. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to binge watch the playlist on screen and check out my coaching too. Until next time.